Hello again, this is Sam Robinson. I am the Gnostic Syncretist. Sorry to my few loyal subscribers that I have been absent for the last couple weeks, but I am back and I'm ready to put out some more content. So, today we are going to talk about the first principles, and the first principles are generally what would be considered Hermetics. Hermeticism, directly coming from the Kybalion, written by the three initiates, as well as this book right here, the Hermetica. Finally got my own copy. And these are the foundational principles of natural law that essentially can guide mankind into a much greater philosophical, spiritual, and scientific understanding of our universe in a way that a lot of other things cannot. And throughout history, this has been regularly suppressed at various times and was the foundation and cornerstone of Western culture in the ancient world and today, starting since the Renaissance. So multiple, like as I said, multiple times it has been either sequestered, or destroyed, or verbally attacked in some way or fashion, and we'll go into that really briefly. So in the Hermetica, this book right here, it's amazing. I haven't finished reading it yet, but what you will find out is that it states, although largely unknown today, the writings attributed to Hermes Thoth have been immensely important in the history of Western thought. They profoundly influenced the Greeks, and their rediscovery in the 15th century in Florence helped to inspire the Renaissance, which gave birth to our modern age. The list of people who have acknowledged a debt to the Hermetica and Hermeticism in general reads like a who's list of the greatest philosophers, scientists, and artists that the West has produced, from Leonardo da Vinci, Dürer, Botticelli, Roger Bacon, the renowned alchemist and physician Paracelsus, Thomas More, William Blake, Johann Kepler, Copernicus, Sir Isaac Newton, Sir Walter Raleigh, John Milton, Ben Jonson, Daniel Defoe, Victor Hugo, and even Carl Jung, the renowned psychologist. It is even heavily influenced as well Shakespeare, John Donne, and John Dee, who was a part of the Elizabethan court, who knew Tycho Brahe, and I think apparently also may have known either Copernicus or Kepler. It is a cornerstone of Western culture. In substance and importance, it is equal to well-known Eastern scriptures such as the Upanishads, the Dhammapada, and the Tao Te Ching. Unlike these texts, which are now readily available and widely read, the works of Hermes have been lost under the dead weight of academic translations, Christian prejudice, and occult obscurities, as I said before. So this is a simplified version of what we called the Corpus Hermeticum, and the history of this is shrouded in mystery. Generally, it is a direct descendant of the ancient philosophy of the Egyptians. However, the handful of surviving works attributed to Hermes are not written in ancient hieroglyphs, but in Greek, Latin, and Coptic. They were collated in the city of Alexandria during the 2nd and 3rd century BC. Here, the Hermetic philosophy helped to inspire some of the greatest intellectual achievements of the ancient world. Alexandria was a great center of learning, surpassing even Athens at its height. Its founder, Alexander the Great, had conquered, united Persia, Egypt, India, and Greece into one place, and then his subordinate general, Ptolemy I, decided to found Alexandria, and then he also decided to found an enormous library in Alexandria, where he started compiling all the greatest works of the ancient world. Into this, what he called a cosmopolis, the universal city, he poured men and women of every race and nation, Greeks, Jews, Egyptians, Babylonians, Phoenicians, and even Buddhists from India, associated together in relative peace, studying all the ancient knowledge of their time. Yes. These include the words of Euclid, Archimedes, the astronomer Ptolemy, who's different from the general Ptolemy, obviously, who dominated, and these guys dominated the spheres of geometry, mathematics, and geography, respectively, until the Middle Ages. It also contained the research of Aristarchus of Samos and Eratosthenes, who was able to accurately, nearly, calculate the circumference of the Earth to within a few percent in the ancient world. Scientists of the library knew about the precession of the equinoxes, and that moon was responsible for the tides. Alexandria was also rich in esoteric knowledge, from Pythagoreanism, Chaldean oracles, Greek myths, Platonic philosophy and Stoic philosophy, Judaism, Christianity, the Greek mystery schools, like the Eleusinian mysteries, Zoroastrianism, astrology, alchemy, Buddhism, and of course the ancient Egyptian religion were all well practiced and studied at this time period. The golden age of Alexandria came to an end, unfortunately, with the birth of the intolerant Christian empire. And this can be easily seen during the horrible and voracious attack on Hypatia, a renowned Greek esoteric scientist and scholar at the library in Alexandria in 415 BC, 415 AD, who was attacked by a mob of Christians, incited by Cyril the Great, the bishop at that time, and they ripped her off her chariot, basically pounded her to death with their bare fists, stripped off all her clothes afterwards, and even went so far as to go to the shoreline and grab seashells and carve all the flesh off of her body with the sharp shells, and then they destroyed her bones, which is thus began the age called the Dark Ages. And it's adequately named because Enlightenment didn't resurface for over 1,000 years after that. Of course, to note, Cyril the Great became Saint Cyril by the founding fathers of the church for his wonderful deeds at this time. It's pretty unbelievable how intolerant they were. They called them pagans because the word pagan meant country dwellers, yet, as we can see, they were far less knowledgeable, far less versed in spiritual understandings, and really the term pagan has been completely misused and misappropriated as attacks on people of actual higher intellect and going against the general grain of orthodoxy, which it began to stamp into the mind of humanity. Furthermore, if it was not for the Muslims who discovered this knowledge, kept it in hiding for hundreds of years, they created an empire using this knowledge of unsurpassed scientific knowledge and splendor, essentially. Though eventually they would fall into orthodoxy themselves and start stamping it out. But until that time, beginning of the 9th century, the first university was established in Baghdad called the House of Wisdom, where many pagan works were translated. The sciences that had reached such heights in Alexandria were significantly developed further, and the ancient pagan spiritual wisdom was covertly studied and practiced. From its exalted position among the sacred scriptures of Egyptian spirituality, the Hermetica became the secret inspiration for an important undercurrent in Islamic philosophy and the holy book of unorthodox religious sects such as the Sabaeans. We would never heard of the mysterious Sabaeans had they not come into conflict with the religious authorities of their day. They were eventually, I think, wiped out as well, though you can find some of this information hidden in the teachings of the Sufi mystics, and as well as the Iranian Sufi philosopher Yahya Surwadri made it his life work to link what he called the original Oriental religion with Islam. He was eventually burned alive, I'm pretty sure. He actually identified Hermes with their prophet Idris in the Quran and the Jewish prophet Enoch, because Hermes was the scribe of the gods. He was credited with giving Egyptians their information on astronomy, astrology, alchemy, mathematics, geometry, architecture, and magic. Basically everything. And eventually this would spark, much later on, in the depths of Florence, the Renaissance. under Cosimo de' Medici, who was a philanthropist, the leader of the city, the mayor, and he was very interested in these types of ancient texts. And when one of his, who was it? Where is it? Yes, here it is. Wait, here it is. In 1438, the Byzantine scholar Gemisto Plethon made available to the awestruck Florentines the entire lost works of Plato. These and other pagan works were translated into Latin for the first time. The ruler of Florence, the philanthropist and scholar Cosimo de' Medici, established a new Platonic academy, a group of intellectuals and mystics who found their inspiration in the ancient pagan philosophy. It profoundly influenced great names like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli, and Raphael, who began painting pictures of the ancient pagan gods. Botticelli's Venus and Mars, for example, was painted at a precise astrological moment as a talisman of occult radiance, capable of magically transporting the viewer to an altered state of spiritual awareness. And as I stated a moment ago, Cosimo sent out agents to look for other lost pagan works, and in 1460, one of them came across the lost works of the thrice great Hermes and brought them to Florence. The Florentines, already reeling from the discovery that an ancient civilization of immense sophistication existed 2,000 years before them, were blown away by this new information. He immediately ordered the guy that was translating the Greek works of Plato to abandon that and start translating this. The emergence of a glorious new culture in Florence signaled the end of the Dark Ages. We call this period the Renaissance, which means rebirth, which is a fitting name, for at the heart of Hermetic philosophy is the idea of being spiritually reborn, which, as you know, the truth, we are involved in the truth community. We are all being spiritually reborn, which comes from the alchemical idea of transmuting the human soul from lead into gold again. Nothing to do whatsoever with transmuting base metals to gold, though that may be possible, I'm not sure. But really, it has to do with spiritual transformation into gold, to a golden spiritual being, once again, that we are all waking up to. I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, this is maybe happening to you. Within a few years, the first printing press even arrived in Italy, and the pagan wisdom was printed and dispersed throughout Europe. Students of the new learning, as the Florentine experiment became known, were sent out as emissaries, beginning new movements wherever they went. Eventually, sadly, in 1492, the Roman Catholic Church, with the aid of the King of France, crushed the Republic of Florence. Although the heady days of the new academy were over, the suppression was too late to prevent the ripples from rippling across all of Europe, and expanded ever outwards. The Florentine scholars were dispersed across Europe and became known as the Fifth Essence. Well, that is enough for the history of it. Let me finish with this last thing. In England, the works of Hermes had a profound effect on the circle of courtiers surrounding Elizabeth I, including William Shakespeare, Francis Bacon, and the enigmatic Hermeticist, John Dee. Unfortunately, there was eventually a well-orchestrated article following that by the successor. I don't know if it's the exact successor, but James I. I guess came out with the King James Bible. Maybe that was the second guy, second James. They were not written by an ancient. Basically, the claim was they were not written by the ancient sage Hermes himself, and then actually these were dated to be no more than the 13th or 2nd century AD. And this was done by Isaac Casaubon, who published a textual analysis of the Hermetica in 1641 and was trying to essentially discredit this ancient information from its enormous basis in antiquity. The philosophy was no more than an exotic blend of Greek, Christian, Jewish philosophy mixed up with astrology and magic. The Egyptian names that were peppered, he said, were mere decoration and ornament. He was actually, and so this became a damning. He was actually quite right, in his assessment of when it may have been dated. Regardless, the information stands on its own, and its merits are not entirely based on how deep in antiquity it comes from. He was a brilliant Greek scholar, and with the encouragement of the Christian status quo, his damning criticism was generally accepted. He had dealt the Egyptian sage a fatal blow. The books of Hermes were destined to be forgotten. In the modern world, we would know from the actions of the tabloid press how one well-timed hatchet job can unjustifiably undermine someone's reputation for good. This is exactly what happened to the thrice great Hermes in this instant. He was a fine scholar, Kasaban, but he was motivated by a hidden political agenda. The ultra-Orthodox James I employed him and others to purge the magically inclined court of Elizabeth. John Dee was ostracized, and he died alone and forgotten, because he was essentially then painted as the great philosopher himself as a confused occultist. So essentially, this was one of the first great hit jobs on this information. But let's now get into the actual information. The 7 first principles, first and principle meaning most important, principia coming from the word first, foremost. And essentially, they're the first principles because they are, of course, like I just stated, the most important principles. Almost everything else comes from this. The 7 Hermetic principles of truth. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple will fly open. From the Kybalion. I'm now reading from the Kybalion. The 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. Number 1, the principle of mentalism. 2, the principle of correspondence. 3, the principle of vibration. 4, the principle of polarity. 5, the principle of rhythm. 6, the principle of cause and effect. And 7, finally, the principle of gender. These 7 principles will be were the foundational aspect of the Renaissance. And with these, many great mysteries can be understood. And scientists today, in the quantum mechanics world, are starting to understand a lot of these things and able to actually experiment with these. So the great wisdom has come back around. It's pretty incredible that they knew this 2,000 years ago, or even earlier. So the first great principle, and I think I'll go through maybe the first 4 today and leave the last 3 for the next video. The principle of mentalism, and I've stated this before in one of my other videos. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind and explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the name of the material universe. This includes all live phenomena in the material universe, matter, energy, manifested physicality. It is essentially all spirit. Everything is spirit. Everything comes from the unknowable, undefinable spirit. And once the all has mentally manifested this, it then becomes reality in the physical on this plane. There are multiple planes of existence, but I'm not going to go into that in this video. Essentially, you can think of the universe as a universal, infinite, living mind that permeates all of reality and is conscious. It explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of this all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole, in its parts and units, has its existence in the mind of the all. Excuse me. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all the very mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, such as ghosts, clairvoyance, telepathy, claircognizance, astral projection, you name it. It essentially helps explain nearly everything. I mean, I tend to think of ghosts as a conscious, energetic impression left on that area of the universe, and not some sort of soul or being trapped in between worlds. It's the energetic impression of what happened before they died. I can't prove that, but that's what makes the most sense to me. And this law would help easily explain how that would actually make sense. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and apply them to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws instead of using them in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. It explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter. Matter is simply a mental vibration at a very low rate. And that gets into the next principle. The third principle. Everything is subordinate to the mastery of the mind. Everything. Since the universe is mental, an undeniable force of consciousness that permeates all of existence, essentially mastery of your own mind and its own mental capacities is key in every single way of understanding anything that you want to do that is supposedly beyond this world. And you will not ever grasp any of your psychic powers. You'll never grasp the nature of the universe. You'll never grasp the nature of yourself if you can't understand this single principle, which essentially turns the entire foundation of modern materialistic society on its head in every single way. And they were discovering this in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the New Thought movement and the Theosophical Society under Rudolf Steiner and Havana Blavatsky. And once again, this information was put on the fringe, and materialistic science and ideas began to rule the day for the last 80 years. But we're having a reawakening now, and this is no longer how it's going to be. I hope in the future that we can eventually get everyone to understand these concepts, and that we can form a critical mass where this will actually happen. But we'll talk about that another day. Second, you have the principle of correspondence. This is where you may have heard the phrase, as above, so below, as below, so above. And as this principle essentially embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomenon of the varied planes of being in life. The old Hermetic axiom ran as these words, as above, so below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many a dark paradox and hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence, we are able to then understand many things that would be otherwise unknowable to us. This principle is a universal natural law, and its application and manifestation of the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe is, as I just stated, a universal law. The ancient Hermeticists consider this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enable man to measure distance, sun, and their movements, while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principles of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he's able to understand the archangel. Now let me kind of break this down for a second. If you've ever heard of the idea that the universe is holographic, Elon Musk stated this recently. I think it was last year. The universe is holographic. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. What that means, and what this principle essentially means, is that we live in a fractal universe. The entire capacity and essence of the one monad, the universal infinite living mind, is imbued into every piece and particle of the universe. Everything retains a replica within itself, every particle, including us, obviously, because we're made up of particles, of the entire universe. That's where the idea of the universe is you comes from. That's where that comes from. We are the universe, meaning the universe is God, and we, inside ourselves, carry all the aspects of God in a single container. If you've ever, well, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but that might help some people make sense. If you've ever watched Dragon Ball Z and you have seen the character Cell, you remember Cell? Cell had every single cell in his body have a complete essence of the whole of his being in every cell so that he could regenerate if he lost everything but a single cell. And this actually happens in the show. And then he was able to spontaneously come back with his entire being intact. It's the same concept, being holographic, meaning the entirety of the universe is contained in every particle, all of its essence, down to the lowest minuscule particle and element. As above, so below. As below, so above. It starts to make a lot of sense. Also, if you take, say, a hologram and you cut it into 4 pieces, if you cut it into 4 pieces and you look, it will not actually cut the hologram image itself into 4 pieces. You'll end up with 4 holograms of the same image, but just smaller. This is the idea of fractals. The entirety of the whole is contained within the single. Now, I think I've explained this enough. Let's go to the third principle. The principle of vibration. Nothing is at rest. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion. Everything vibrates. Nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science now endorses, and which even new scientific discoveries tend to verify. Yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the ancient masters of Egypt. This principle explains the differences between different manifestations of mind, matter, and spirit are all just different rates of vibration. Everything is sound, everything is light. A quote from even the great one, Albert Einstein. He began to understand this. Actually, one of the books that he apparently, an article just came out, kept in his library was Isis Unveiled by Havana Blavatsky. Just kind of an interesting side note. From the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter, all is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position on the scale. Meaning, the vibration of spirit is at an extremely high rate of vibration to the point that it seems that it's at rest. At the same time, you have gross matter. Gross matter is at such a low rate of vibration that it seems to be practically at rest, and thus we see what we consider to be the material and physical universe. All this matter around us is moving and vibrating. If nothing is at rest, as the principle states, it's just at such a low rate of vibration that it seems that it's static and dead. I mean, dead energy in a sense. That's what it says right here, actually, in the book. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration. From corpuscle and electron, atom and molecule, to worlds and universes. Everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration as well. And also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibration, and even on the spiritual planes. People talk about interdimensional entities, they talk about aliens having a higher vibration, and so on. But understanding this principle helps the student of Hermeticism or of life understand that things are not quite that simple, yet they can still be understood. This principle, with the appropriate formulas, enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations, as well as those of others. The master also applies this principle to conquering of natural phenomena in various ways. Quote, "He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power," says one of the old writers. This is essential. This is a master key to understanding how everything truly works in our world, and is counter to pretty much as well all materialistic science in some fashion, because they see everything as objectively different. Each thing is its own thing, when they don't see the universal essence encompassing it all, or that it's all in movement and nothing is resting. And scientific experiments are being done to try and understand this, and that's in the fringe realm. But there are breakthroughs happening at this point. Now, the fourth principle, and I will finish up with this today. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet, and all truths are but half-truths, and all paradoxes may be reconciled, from the Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Meaning, when we think of such ideas as hot and cold, light and dark, they are essentially the same. They are varying degrees of the exact same thing. Just think of heat and think of cold. What is it really? It is either the absence of heat, which is cold, or an increase in heat, which, eventually will combust and become fire. But it's all temperature. Same thing with light and dark. If you say something is lit up, it is simply an increase of photons. If you say it is lacking and is in darkness, it's a decrease of photons. It is a decrease in light. Darkness and light are essentially the same thing. Just one is the absence of the other, and one is an increase of the same thing. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. It's pretty incredible when you really start to think about it. This applies to most things as long as you remember that everything is consciousness, one, and that everything vibrates, two, and you never forget the principle of correspondence. If you don't understand the first three principles, this principle will not make a lot of sense to you, and I understand that. But let me continue. Like here it states, look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat and cold actually begin. Where heat begins and cold ends, or vice versa. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. Only in the mind and language of humanity does this concept exist. In nature, it doesn't exist. They're just simply two poles of the exact same thing. What is the difference between large and small? Does anybody really know? Can you explain to me the difference between hard and soft? Or sharp and dull, black and white, noise and quiet, high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two mental states, apparently totally different, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the term like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we're at a loss to know whether we like or dislike something or neither. Honestly, I believe that the word love is thrown around far too much, and most people should really be using the word like, but that's just me. And all are simply degrees of the same thing, as you will see if you'll but think a moment. And more than this, it is possible to change the vibration of hate to the vibrations of love in one's own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines have had a personal experience of involuntarily rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse, in your own case and that of others. And you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing, and I know people aren't going to want to hear that, but I understand. That may be too much for some people to understand. The Hermetic's understanding of the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of this principle will enable one to change his own polarity as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. Well, I'm Sam Robinson, the Gnostic Syncretist, and I hope you enjoyed my video. Like if you liked it, subscribe please if you would, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. I hope everybody is doing well. Continue your ascension. Continue searching for the truth. There are no gurus. You are your own. Always remember that you always are your own guru. That is the most important principle. I've yet to find a guru that is essential to every one of the types of topics that I'm actually looking into. Do your own thinking. Be your own guru. This is the Gnostic Syncretist. And with that, I'll see you next time.